And let's put our hands together to invite Benjamin here on the stage with us. Benjamin, come over please.
I'll just give you a very brief kind of background on myself. I've been working with Casper Innovative Medicine as a deputy vice president for the past 3.5 years. And I met Tony about 100 years ago in Paris, where we both were taking a course in bioenergetics. So I've had a kind of incredible opportunity to meet a lot of different types of medical practitioners and extraordinary individuals and learn a whole bunch of new things. But I'm here today to share with you a very personal experience that kind of started me on my journey to asking a lot of these questions that we're all here asking today. And it goes back actually to my childhood, where I was one who always wanted to figure out how things work. How many people here feel like you need to understand a mechanism? Yeah, so I think everyone here, we have this kind of inclination where we just want so badly to understand the way the world around us works. And I was no exception. As a young child, I was a kid who took apart my mom's phone, and I ripped the windshield wipers off my dad's car one time and tried to make a robot. But I was always looking for answers as to how mechanisms worked, and later on go to college to study mechanical engineering, and ended up studying philosophy to see how different thought processes can help me understand how the world worked. But early in my 20s, I came across an experience, a challenge that I couldn't make any sense of. I just couldn't figure out using only a mechanistic model of how things worked. And it was a challenge that the resolution of which would forever change my entire conception of how people heal and what I now know to be possible. And this is the experience I'd like to share with you. And it begins in 2008, where I'm a relatively healthy young guy here, age 24. My entire life at this point consists of surfing. I'm a surf instructor, a physical therapist, a personal trainer. Everything I love to do revolves around the water, vitality, being healthy, and helping others to find their own vitality and explore their own potential with health. But on this particular occasion, I was in West Africa, and I started to experience these strange symptoms, unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. Different joint pains and fatigue. And I dismissed it, like we sometimes do, especially at a young age, as maybe being, part of the long travel, being away from home, maybe some of the food that I ate, or being part of in a different kind of environment. But on this particular occasion, I was out in the water, and I was actually surfing in competition. And I was feeling a little bit weak, and I jumped up to my feet on this board, and all of a sudden my legs completely went numb. And I face planted, and I felt myself going very, very limp in the water. And using only my upper body, I managed to get back to shore, but something was seriously wrong. My entire body at that point was going through these muscle spasms and contractions uncontrollably. I was weak, and for days after that, didn't have any appetite. Even so, I managed to convince my young mind that it was just the harshness of the environment, and then when I got home, I'd be able to rest up and return to all these different activities that I love to do. And I had a competition coming up shortly, which was going to be a 30-kilometer paddle from this hometown where I grew up in Montauk, which is in the northeast coast of the States, to a small island about 30 kilometers off the coast. We were going to paddle that whole distance as a race. So I thought I'd rest up and just prepare, and a few weeks later I'll be doing that next endeavor. The only problem is these symptoms that I was experiencing, not only did they not get better with rest, they continued to get worse. And they migrated from these physical pains and symptoms in my body to real joint pains and stiffness. My joints started blocking up, and then I started experiencing cognitive problems, like blurred vision and real confusion, until I woke up this one morning. I'll never forget. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, and I was staring at these two spots on the floor for a few minutes, and I was trying to figure out what they were. And as my vision came into focus, I could see clearly that they were my shoes, but still I couldn't make the connection of what they were for. Let alone when I went down and tried to put them on my feet and tie them, I couldn't figure out how to do it at age 24. And a few weeks later, as this continued, I stayed in bed feeling like I had the flu. I remember an occasion where I tried to go into the kitchen, struggled my way to get there, moving very, very stiffly, and tried to figure out how to cook an omelet. It proved to be more difficult than I thought as I was fumbling around, and I sat down to think it over. And before I knew it, I looked at the clock, and it was 4 p.m. About 6 hours had gone by. I had been sitting there, not knowing this time was passing, and I still hadn't figured out how to cook the omelet. So these instances continued, and just for a few weeks until I knew that I had a real problem. And at that point, I lost the ability to drive, to really take care of myself, and I ended up moving home. And from there on out, it was just a non-stop process, living with my mother, who was taking me to different doctors, really from one specialist to the next, to rheumatologists to look at the problems of why my joints were so stiff, neurologists looking into the brain, and every doctor I went to found a new problem. Until finally, things got so bad, NYU did a study on me, and they came back with these types of results. They found severe demyelinating polyneuropathy. They found multiple brain lesions in my prefrontal cortex, and I was given clinical diagnoses of multiple sclerosis and neurologic Lyme disease from a spinal tap that had been done. Lyme disease is an unfortunately in some way common problem in the northeast of the U.S. It's a tick-borne illness, which means these small bugs that transmit a spirochete, a bacterial infection that they can inject into the bloodstream. Commonly, though, what happens is people will get this type of a rash, and they'll treat it with the course of antibiotics while it's still in the bloodstream, and that usually does the problem, does the trick. But in my case, these symptoms had started long ago, and if it's left untreated and makes its way into the central nervous system, as these brain scans showed and as my spinal tap showed, it can cause some severe and debilitating symptoms like those that I was experiencing. And it can even cause some problems that, in many cases, never resolve themselves. I had indeed begun to speak with different patients, as many chronically ill patients do, different support groups and so forth, and I found a Lyme support group where I met a number of patients who had been sick with this illness for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, their entire lives, going through this route, seeing one doctor after the other like I was seeing, with no resolution, with no end in sight. But we do the best we can, and we seek out the most professional MDs that we can. So I continued with this, and I went on these regimens of longer, higher dose antibiotics, and it was like going back and forth, this kind of treatment between using antibiotics and harsh treatments, which have their place to really target and destroy the bacterial infection that's there. But as a side effect, it would cause severe imbalance in the gut dysbiosis, in the gut milieu. And I would have overgrowths of parasites and candida, and then I'd have to take a break and go off the antibiotic, during which time the bacterial infection, the strongest ones, would come and overwhelm the system, right? So it was like this back and forth battle each time, going on stronger antiparasitics, antifungals, taking time away from the antibiotics, and then having to come back and go on stronger and stronger antibiotics. And each time I went through this cycle, it was like one other organ or system was failing. So first my endocrine system crashed, and a doctor very politely told me that he had a 12-year-old girl in his office earlier that day with higher testosterone than I did. On another occasion, I went to see a cardiologist because I was having these palpitations, and he found that I had POTS, which is postural orthostasis tachycardia, which basically meant that my heart became so sensitive to my body's orientation and space that every time I moved, if I tilted my head to the side, if I leaned forward, if I sat up too quickly, I would start having these, what felt like mini heart attacks. My heart rate would start elevating to sometimes 200 beats per minute. And so for the next about year or so, every time I woke up, the first thing I would sit up and I'd have these mini heart attacks. And it was probably the most stressful way to start a day you could imagine. And I'd have to wear these halter-top monitors 24/7. They'd be monitoring me in every which way. Onward and downward, the cycle continued for 2 years. I was in bed until 2010. I reached an all-time low. At this point, I'm laying in bed, I'm on intravenous antibiotics, immune modulators daily, and I'm tethered to an oxygen tank. I had lost 40 pounds of lean body mass at this point, and I was literally too weak to even walk. So, something became vividly clear to me that the way I was working and the way this medicine treatment was working wasn't working. Unless something changed very significantly, this would go on and on for the rest of my life, like it had in fact for many of the people that I had met. My next thought, of course, was, what can I possibly change when I can barely move? And I started to panic. And I'll never forget this feeling of absolute panic, or all the things, feeling like everything's slipping away, the things that I used to do, the sports I would engage in, the things I never had a chance to do again, people I never see again. Real panic, overwhelming. And then I finally got a hold of myself and was just able to do one thing, make one small change. I took one deep breath. And I felt just a little bit better. And there's a saying that a journey 1,000 miles begins with a single footstep. That breath was that very first footstep for me. What they don't tell you is that you then have to take a second one, a third one. And slowly, over time, you build up. And it's amazing that sometimes the things that seem like they have the lightest touch will have the greatest impact down the line if we allow ourselves to pursue that course. So this little tiny feeling that I had of calm that came with that deep breath was enough for me to create a practice out of this. And I resolved that if I could do nothing else, because there was nothing else I could do, that every morning I would start off with just taking this one deep breath. So that's what I did. And before long, this breath turned into several breaths and became a meditation practice for me. And then I started doing a few small stretches, just a few things that I could manage to move from my bed. And the important thing at that moment wasn't so much what I was doing, but that I was doing. I started to put it in my mind and visualize every morning, even before I opened my eyes when I woke up. I visualized myself taking these breaths, doing this meditation, going through the movements of these small stretches, and then I'd wake up and I would do it exactly as I saw it and had played it out in my mind. And it started to give me confidence, just a little bit of hope that I can actually set out and do some of the things and have some measure of control over an otherwise completely uncontrollable situation. But an interesting thing is that it also made me feel physically better. I felt that small measure of calm grow to a slight alleviation of symptoms and then more dramatic alleviation of symptoms. So in the limited amount of time and brain power and energy that I had, I used my resources to find out why. If I could read for a half hour a day, I would read work of people like Dr. Bruce Lipton, who delineated a lot of these pathways that were mentioned before that explain precisely how stress affects the immune system, what's known as the PNI or psychoneuroendocrine immune system, and explains how these thoughts in our mind can lead to physiological reactions and changes in the body. And at times when I couldn't read because I would get too tired or lose focus, then I would listen. And at this time, around 2010, 2011, very fortunately, a lot of these universities in the States like MIT and UC Berkeley, UCLA, and UCSF, the medical schools were putting a lot of their 100 and 200 level courses online. So I basically enrolled as a full-time student from the comfort of my couch to listen to some of these educational programs and become inspired that maybe, just maybe, we could orient our thoughts and ourselves in a new direction, expand our awareness, and that perhaps that would have some change, some beneficial outcome over our physiology. So I continued these practices, and every time it was a slight upward spiral. That was very encouraging. And the more I learned, the more I started paying attention to different aspects, to what I ate, my thoughts. I learned how these thoughts affect the body, and I started paying close attention to my thoughts. And I realized at the time that they were all negative. A lot of fear, a lot of worry, a lot of those things that just cycle around in the background, right, that we're barely even aware of, but they're always there. But I became aware, and I started making a practice to be aware of these thoughts that were running the subconscious programs. And I remembered back to the first rule of defensive driving, at least the way it's taught in the States. And that first rule is so simple, we can apply it to life, but it's so simple that we miss it. It says, never look at what you're trying to avoid. And what had I been doing? What had so many of us been doing in trying to fight against the disease is staring constantly at what we're trying to avoid. So my new ritual became to get rid of all of the things in my life that I felt were not beneficial to me. So I actually got rid of the medical papers that were inducing fear and scaring me about chronic illness and how this could go on for the rest of your life. And I got rid of the oxygen tank eventually when I learned how to breathe better on my own and increase my oxygenation. And I replaced those things with things that would give me some measure of hope. So I filled my room with surfing magazines. I got all my travel gear out after several years of being in the closet, dusted it off, and with the hope that one day I might be able to travel again. There's this TV program I like to watch in the States called Survivor Man, where this guy would go out into the wilderness with nothing but a knife, and he had these rugged pants on. He would do all these things, and I always loved nature. It always kind of just reminded me of something about how we naturally are supposed to function. It gave me a sense of calm, so I watched this show, and I saw one time you could actually buy his pants. So I went online and I bought his pants, and I never expected that I would use them, but I put them over the back of my chair, and every time I looked at this scene that I had created for myself, like a little shrine of travel gear and my surfboard and these things that hadn't been used, but they were always filtering into my subconscious and just reminding me on a daily basis of what I was moving toward. I even took it to the next level. I stopped sleeping in my bed. I started sleeping on the floor, and I would drag this little yoga mat around so that every day I could wake up with a brand new perspective and see the world just a little bit different from a different angle. And it's an interesting thing that happens, again, talking about these small steps we take leading to new discoveries. When you start to eliminate the things in your life that no longer serve you, like was mentioned before, when you start to eliminate toxins, whether on a cellular level or on a mental level, it makes space for things that are beneficial to come into your life. It makes space for new discoveries. Through the grapevine, speaking with different people who I was inspired by, reading more material, learning more things about alternative health, I discovered a new type of advanced integrative treatment. Some guys in New York that were putting all of these different pieces together and talking about the mind-body connection, talking about nutrition, talking about toxicity, talking about all these different things and how they all work together. And I found myself pursuing this type of advanced integrative medicine that starts with the premise that our innate state, our natural state is to be healthy, and that the body is actually this highly intelligent, self-healing system, just like any system we see in nature. Just like we can see birds flocking together, we can see schools of fish and the way they all turn in this dynamic function. If we look at anything, if we were to pull a leaf off of the trees, we would see this very intricate cellular pattern taking place there, and that the human body is ultimately no different. That it will always trend toward recovery and to returning to this natural state whenever the right conditions permit. The only problem is that sometimes we interfere where the right conditions aren't there. Sometimes we do get impacted by stress from our mind, by bacteria from the environment, by a whole array of different things, whether it's acute like injuries or more subtle. But the fact is that if we can remove these roadblocks, the natural tendency is to be healthy and that we'll return to that state whenever we overcome those obstacles. This gave me real hope, and they also encouraged me as I pursued some of these treatments to continue with all those lifestyle changes I was making. And the conception I had in my mind is I started to see things less on the basis of individual patterns. A lot of us, and I was told by a physicist that I met last year, Nassim Haramein, he said all too often in medicine and in health and in science in general, we get very focused and very caught up in searching for the fundamental particle. This one little thing that we think is responsible for the entire dysfunction. In my case, we were always looking for the one pathogen that we thought was causing all of these symptoms I was experiencing. And then the flip side of that is that we always start to search for the one solution that we think is going to be the magic pill, the magic bullet that's going to change everything else. Because also often we focus on finding the one fundamental particle when in reality we sometimes need to take a step back so we can see the entire pattern, the fundamental pattern that makes up everything about us and who we are. So the new thinking under this paradigm became that if health is really a pattern, and disease is a pattern, that maybe it's possible to repattern this vicious cycle I was experiencing that was destined for disease into a virtuous circle that can be redesigned and repurposed for health. And I continued these over the next year and a half, feeling better and better with some ups and downs. But by 2011, 2012, I returned for clinical testing, at which time they found that there was no brain lesions, they found no traces of Lyme disease or any other co-infections. They found testosterone levels and all hormonal systems in my body regain normal function, and they found that every organ and system, in fact, had reorganized itself and resumed its proper capabilities. And for me, most fortunately, I was able to return to those activities that I love to do so much. I also finally returned to nature, and I got the opportunity to wear those pants that I ordered for no apparent reason at the time, but here I am enjoying myself in a week in survival school, which was a fantastic experience, and for me a major turning point from transitioning from not only the physical gateway of being sick to now being healthy, but also that final mental, emotional, and spiritual hurdle of ceasing to hold myself back and fully embracing and embodying my new condition as 100% healthy as I stand today, as I feel today. So, not long ago, I actually ran into one of the first doctors who treated me in these conventional ways, and sure enough, he saw me healthy, and he'd seen me the last time, several years ago, extremely sick at my lowest point, and he asked me, true to the nature of the way most of us think, he asked me, what supplement did you take? Tell me, what medicine? What was it so I could share with everyone else? Oh boy, I'll tell you, my mind started to race with all of the things that I had learned, all of the things I'd learned about physics and patterns versus particles, all the changes I made, every little step that I took along the way. And I wanted to explain all these things to him, but I realized that he was asking a question that was simple and he was expecting a simple answer. So I gave him a simple answer after I thought about it. I traced it back in my mind to think what started this whole journey for me. And so when he asked me what did it, I told him I took one deep breath. So I just shared with you that sometimes in any problem, whether it's health or otherwise, we might find an instance where we're just too close to the problem to see the solution. Sometimes we might be looking at things under a microscope. It's in those times that I want to remind us all to stop for a moment, to take a deep breath, to take a step back, and to allow ourselves to lose sight of that concept of the particle and gain insight into the pattern. Because it's that pattern as a collective that creates our life. Thank you.
Thank you.